served as the Communications Director for the Office of Public Liaison. Since leaving office, she has released a series of secret tapes and authored a global best-selling book, copies of which you can purchase after the event. Please could you join me in welcoming her with a warm round of applause.
Good evening. I'm a Baptist preacher, so in the US, when you say good evening, usually there's a call and response. So I'm going to try it again. Start again. Say Omarosa, Manigault, Newman.
Omarosa, Manigault, Newman.
Good evening. Good evening. Oh, that's more like it. I hope that we will have a lively discussion this evening. I'm sure you don't want to be lectured to, but I certainly want to hear from you, hear your questions, and engage in a dialogue. But first, I am Omarosa Manigault Newman, and I am so excited to be here, and I am so excited to share my story, but more importantly, I'm really excited to hear your questions and give you a little insight into my very interesting journey. I grew up in the Westlake Projects in Youngstown, Ohio. My father was killed when I was 7. My mother, a single mother, worked 3 jobs to raise us. I'm the youngest of 4 children, and unfortunately, my brother would go on to be killed just 7 years ago in the same tough community that I grew up in. I went on to graduate from high school and attend Central of Ohio, where I majored in journalism and a minor in business. My master's and doctoral studies were at Howard University in Washington, D.C. During my master's program, I went looking for a job, and so I started volunteering at the Democratic Party in the evenings, and when I finished my master's degree, I got a job working for Vice President Al Gore in the White House. I would leave Al Gore and take a promotion working for none other than President Bill Jefferson Clinton. After leaving the White House, I went back to the DNC, where I worked and did fundraising. And then I heard about an interesting show called The Apprentice. Anybody watch The Apprentice? Okay, good, I'm not by myself. In 2003, the show was marketed as a job interview, an opportunity to lead one of Donald Trump's companies. Well, I had student loans and a lot of ambition, and so I thought, I'll apply to work for Donald Trump and to run one of his companies. And out of 250,000 applicants, little girl from the Westlake Projects of Youngstown, Ohio was selected to appear on this national television show, competing against the best and the brightest to be Donald Trump's apprentice. Well, here we are 15 years later, and so much has happened between when you saw me in the boardroom on not just 1 season, not 2, but 3 seasons. I know, I should either get my head checked or I'm a glutton for punishment. But 3 seasons of The Apprentice. Donald and I would become very close, and I would go on to actually co-produce and create a television show called The Ultimate Merger with him. And then fast forward, I got a call from Donald Trump who said, I'm going to run for president. And you're one of the few people that I know who's worked in the White House, and I want you to come and work on my campaign. Well, the rest is history, because Donald Trump, the guy I used to kind of battle with in the boardroom, had become the 45th president of the United States. And after he took that oath of office and we sat down for our first senior staff meeting, I looked around the room, and around the table of his senior staff, I was the only African American in the room. I was one of the few women in the room. And the 30 of us, all assistants of the presidents, were charged to advise Donald Trump, in addition to his cabinet, on running the country. That didn't go so well. In the first week, Donald Trump decided to have a travel ban. A travel ban. There were protests and people couldn't get into the country. And I went to my old friend, Donald Trump, and said, what are you doing? You can't do this. You can't ban people from coming into this country because of their religion. Forget the fact that my father, of course, was Muslim, but it was just not right. In that moment, I knew that Donald Trump had changed. Something wrong had gone on in his mind. He was surrounded by people who, Steve Bannon, you know that name? Steve Miller. I looked to my left, Steve Miller. I looked to my right, Steve Bannon. And down the row, Sean Spicer. It would seem that our administration was off to a rocky start, but things would go even crazier. I mean, I could call out incidents and you all would recognize them, but there was one that I want to share with you before I take your questions that made me realize just how bad things were. It was Charlottesville. Do you all remember what happened in Charlottesville? When I tell you, I replay that over and over again in my mind, and I think of the young woman. Her name was Heather Heyer, who died because of inaction of this administration. When I tell you that that moment, that defining moment in the administration haunts me over and over and over again. Because even though we employed him, we begged him to do something, to send in the National Guard, to intercede with the men marching down the street, white supremacists with tiki torches. Donald Trump continued to play golf and decided to do nothing. And then after that, he had a press conference where he said that there were good people on both sides. Well, I should have thrown up my hands and marched out of the White House in protest, but there was only one problem. If I left, there would be no one who looked like me in the room. And I would essentially be handing my portfolio over to Steve Bannon, Steve Miller, Reince Priebus, and at that point, Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Hope Hicks, people with very little experience and no insight into the dynamics of the African American community. And so I started to plan my departure and try to find someone who could take on my portfolio and continue to do the work because I was done. I said very publicly that January the 20th would be my last day. I'm going to find somebody, I would leave. But then General Kelly had different plans. I was called into the Situation Room of the White House, one of the most secure rooms in the world. Soundproof, bulletproof, protected by men with automatic weapons. You can only be buzzed in and you can only buzz out. You can't storm out of the Situation Room. You have to be buzzed out of the Situation Room. And in the Situation Room, John Kelly, a 4-star general, looked at me and said, "This could be a friendly departure. Hopefully things won't get ugly for you. If we were in the military, I would court-martial you. I hope there won't be any damage to your reputation, threats." The one thing that General Kelly didn't know is that there would be his side of the story, my side of the story, and tapes. Quickly, the White House released their side of the story, that I'd run through the residence screaming and louting and doing all kinds of crazy things. But isn't it nice to have receipts? Clearly, the president's recording I released where he declared he had no idea. He didn't know what was happening. He was shocked to hear that I'd been locked up and that this had happened to me, but as we know, that wouldn't be the truth, but it would get worse. It sounds like a nightmare that just keeps going. Upon defending myself and releasing the truth, Donald Trump decided to take to Twitter and his 53 million followers and start to call me names, to insult my intelligence, to call me a lowlife, and to ultimately call me a dog. And so a 15-year relationship with the President of the United States had come to a decisive end. And I wish that was the end of the story. I wish that that was the final chapter in my life with Donald Trump. But then he and his allies started a campaign to silence me. They first sent letters to my publisher threatening to sue them and to shut down the publication of my book. And then they sent letters to me and anyone I was associated with and all of my businesses saying that I violated an agreement to never say anything disparaging about Donald Trump. To never, for the rest of my life, say anything disparaging when every single day he does something that is even more shocking than the day before. And so anyway, I stand here in front of you as a woman who is not afraid, who will not be intimidated, who will not be silenced, who will not be walked over, pushed around, or bossed around. I've come to tell my story, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the address, Omarosa. You touched on the sort of lack of diversity in the boardroom in the Trump administration. In your experience, what's been the most challenging aspect of being an African-American woman in American politics?
Well, traditionally in American politics, it's run by white men who are all over 65, maybe 70. Until this midterm election, the House of Representatives' average age was 70. But because of the election of so many women and people of color and young candidates, that age, average age has now dropped to 60. But there has been traditionally a lack of diversity in politics.
And with diversity also comes diversity of race, comes diversity of viewpoints. And what do you think it was about you that caused you to have that conversation with General Kelly, or for him to call you to the Situation Room?
Well, first of all, I was probably way too vocal about wanting to leave. And I had started to be very critical of the administration, which is probably not a smart thing to do while you're still on the job. And Donald Trump does not like to be criticized. I don't know that any boss does, but there was a time where I felt that I needed to start to speak up and be vocal, and not just doing it behind closed doors, but to publicly push back against him. And so I believe that that's what led to me being locked into the Situation Room.
And at what point did you decide that it would be best to record tapes? Because to me it seems like that means that there was a lack of confidence in the White House right from the beginning for an employee to feel that they would have to record tapes to protect themselves. Have
you ever seen Donald Trump? I don't even know if he knows how to spell the truth. It's very difficult. I'm not being coy when I say this. I am in the middle of arbitration with Donald Trump over said tapes. And one of the tactics that they've used is, as I've stated, not only to silence, but to threaten me. He wanted Jeff Sessions and the Justice Department to arrest me. Not that I'm intimidated, but I do listen to my lawyers. And so I will just say this, and again, I'm not being coy, but as I see all the camera phones up, I'll be cautious. There was a point where you knew something was off, and in the morning he would say one thing, by the afternoon he would completely say something else, and look at you as if the morning didn't even register. And so you would have a conversation with someone about your conversation with the president that morning. In their briefing, he agreed to $14 million to improve the water crisis with Flint. So by the afternoon, when I met with the budget director, Mick Mulvaney, to have that money sent to Detroit, Mick would say, the president said he never had that conversation with you. It became very difficult to do my job because of Donald Trump's inability to tell the truth. From moment to moment, hour by hour, day by day. I don't know if he would forget what he said, which was what I thought at first. I was giving him the benefit of the doubt that he was just older. But then I realized that it was pathological.
And you're sort of among the few African Americans that was on the Trump campaign from the start. Do you feel that ever alienated yourself within the African American community who overwhelmingly voted Democrat or tend to overwhelmingly vote Democrat?
You know, I get asked about that, but I want to be very cautious. Just like this room is very diverse, the African American community is not a monolith. I can't tell you that every African American in America thinks the same, votes the same, lives the same, thinks the same. I wouldn't say that. And so there was a big portion of the Democratic base of African Americans who completely were very vocal about not wanting me to be there. But there was support from unexpected places, like Vernon Jordan, who is an incredible political strategist, who said, we have to have somebody in the room fighting for issues that are important to us. There's a saying that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I didn't want our agenda items to be on the menu. I wanted to be there fighting for more, for my community, for our schools, for improvement. I keep talking about infrastructure because that's the bill that's coming down the pike that I fought so hard for. Rebuilding streets and schools and building and bridges in Black communities was a top priority for me.
So in the New York Times op-ed, there was mention of an active resistance in the White House. And who do you feel might be some of those figures that are sort of sensible and also promoting some of the causes that you are trying to deliver for the Trump campaign?
It's an excellent question. It's one of the things that I write about in Unhinged. I call it the silent army as well, because there is a group of people, some of them with good intentions, some of them not so much, some of them are part of the deep state that you hear about. But there are people who I call guardrails. You know, if we use the analogy of the Trump train. Well, we've seen the Trump train jump the tracks, but there were always guardrails in place to make sure that Donald Trump didn't destroy our democracy, the fabric of who we are as a country, as a nation.
Thank you very much for that. The midterms were obviously occurred just very recently, and it was quite exciting with the election of the first openly gay congressman, the first female Muslim congresswoman, first two Native American women. So what are your thoughts overall on the results of the midterms?
I was very excited. I was rooting for Beto in Texas. I was just so sad that, that he was so close, yes. I'm also following the races of Stacey Abrams in Georgia, Gillum in my home state of Florida, still keeping an eye on these things because I was hoping that there would be this wave, of progressive thinkers, of people who would right the wrongs that we've seen. So I'm excited that the House is in place. And I believe that as we continue to wait to see the recounts, that I think that there will be more gains, but there's going to be a showdown in Washington. I think that you'll see Washington come to a screeching halt because of the hearings and the investigations that will happen as a result of the Democrats taking control.
And you've already staggered your tapes. Do you have anything planned for 2020?
Oh, yes. Revenge is a dish best served ice cold. No, that was said in jest, but for real. Politics is about timing. Everything is about timing. And, once I'm not tied up in this legal battle and free to tell my full story, maybe there'll be an Unhinged part 2, who knows. Timed perfectly for the re-election of Donald Trump.
So what's the best part now about life outside the White House?
Well, I'm a newlywed, everyone. That's my husband. Wave, honey. During the White House, I worked 16, 17-hour days. I didn't get to see my family. I missed weddings and funerals and, those types of things. It's good to be back to life. But this was my second tour of duty in the White House. And I think it's important to serve your country when asked and when called. But I think also The center of my life is my family and my faith and the work that I do with students and charities and that sort of thing. And so the best part of being outside of the White House is being able to do those things. Come on in, we're not busy, come on in. Being able to do the things that I enjoy and not being a part of the circus anymore.
And should you receive another opportunity to serve your country by being offered a place at the White House, would you take that?
I think it's very important to take in very serious consideration any time the leader of the free world will ask you to serve in any capacity. I didn't take my oath of office lightly when I stood in front of the nation and said those words. I took it very, very seriously. And so if I can serve on a local level or on a state level or on a federal level, and I'm called to do that, and I feel that I can be helpful, then certainly I will. And I encourage all of you to do so as well. I'm sure wherever you're from, your different backgrounds, your community, your family, your country needs you.
No, thank you very, very much for that. I think that's probably enough from me. I'm sure there'll be many, many questions from the audience. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand and wait. Yes, if you'd like to say your name, and also wait for a steward to come to you with a microphone. Okay, that's the hand very quickly over there.
Hi, Omarosa. Thanks for...
Tell me your name, please. Hi, Hassan.
Hi. I wanted to ask just two quick questions. The first was, in Fire and Fury, the author talks about how there was a grand sense in the campaign of Donald Trump that this was never a realistic objective, and even talk that he only really ran for president in order to generate enough press coverage to launch his own TV channel. I wanted to ask you, did you ever get any semblance of that whilst working in the campaign? And my other question was, how much contact have you had with the Robert Mueller inquiry, and what do you see as being the end game in that?
So thank you so much for that question, Hassan. Yes, all of those things are true. First of all, there was talk of a Trump news channel. I remember when Donald first started doubting whether or not he would win, and he started saying the election was rigged and that sort of thing. And that's when I thought he was a bit nervous. But there was some motivation because of the mocking, the shunning, people making fun of him. I particularly remember being at the White House Correspondents' Dinner when Barack Obama roasted him. And he was sitting there, and I was just a couple of tables away, and I remember looking over and seeing this look on his face. And I describe it in the book of when we were leaving out, and he said some pretty choice words. But I think that that was a very defining moment, that he wanted to exact revenge. And what I saw in the first 100 days of the administration was him trying to undo Barack Obama's legacy, bit by bit, step by step, and trying to just erase everything that he had accomplished. And so to some extent, all of that is true. But I don't know if it says more about Trump, that he ran and thought he could win, or more about the electorate that elected him to be president. That's something that we have to give thought. Your second question, Hassan, was about the Mueller investigation. I've been very open about cooperating with him and providing him whatever it is that they requested, and my attorneys continue to be in touch with them. And when they call, I answer. You don't ignore the calls from the FBI. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Hassan. Any other questions? Yes, just here at the front.
Hey, Chuka.
Yeah, so obviously you've come in for a lot of criticism. I'm not going to go into that, but I just want to find out from a personal level, how do you cope with the criticism you face both in the US and globally, because it must take a toll on you and your family?
Thank you so much for the question, Chuka. First and foremost, if I can give you any advice as students, please do not be controlled by what people think about you. Don't let your critics or your haters define your future or how you react. I absolutely could care less what people who don't know me have to say about me. As the highest ranked African American woman in the United States government, it came with the territory. And I knew I could take the heat, and so I took the role. But for each of you, you're going to go into places and positions where people are all going to have an opinion about you. And I guarantee you, you're not going to please everybody. But do not be controlled or manipulated by what people think about you. Have a strong sense of who you are, what you want to accomplish, and what you believe, and be unwavering in that. Certainly, across the globe, I've seen articles and statements and assessments of who I am and what I am, and they don't know me. God knows me, my family knows me, but more importantly, I know who I am. And because of that, who cares what the haters say? Haters gonna hate.
Thank you very much for that, Chuka. Just here at the front, sorry.
Is your mic working? Okay, good.
Hi,
Hi, tell
my
me
name
your
is
name.
Allison.
Hey, Allison.
Big fan of The Apprentice.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also I just had a question about this week. So we had the resignation of Jeff Sessions, big Washington Post article that just came out talking about Michael Cohen and possible indictments coming down. And I was just wondering what your opinion was about those, whether you think it's going to make a difference or whether Donald Trump is just untouchable. And no matter what comes investigation-wise, he's always going to come out, on the right foot.
Thank you so much for that question. I had a really good chat, in fact, with my good friend Michael Cohen last night. Michael was about to go for his sentencing hearing. You all know who Michael Cohen is? He was the president's lawyer for a long time. Michael was about to go for his sentencing hearing on December the 12th. And I wasn't talking to him as someone who worked on the campaign or that I knew from the organization for a decade. I was talking to him as a man who, because of his loyalty and service to Donald, is now facing a very long possibility of being in prison, away from his family and away from his life, and the consequences of loyalty. Sometimes loyalty will keep you in a situation so much longer than logic would have. Sometimes you stay in bad friendships and relationships longer than you should because you're loyal to that person or you believe the best in that person. And that's an example of with Michael and myself. I don't believe that one thing will take Donald out. I think it will be death by like 1,000 cuts. And I think that they'll all culminate at one time. What was interesting about the Wall Street Journal article that you mentioned is who owns the Wall Street Journal? Somebody who's friendly to Trump. And so if the institutions that generally have his back are now breaking these stories and going in depth, 30 sources. One of the Michael called me, he's like, were you one? I said, no, were you one? Then who are these 30 people? People are turning on him. The article mentioned David Pecker. In my book, I described my very bizarre 2 years of working for the National Enquirer. Don't ask, I know. Don't say anything. But David Pecker has immunity, which lets you know if everybody around you is getting immunity, it's going down. You're probably going down. And so it won't be that one thing with Donald. I think it'll be a culmination of all his deception catching up with him. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much for that. I'm aware there's no microphone upstairs, so if you could just shout from the top.
Hi, Derek.
I'm asking if you do maybe want to run sometime in the future, assuming you go for the African American vote, and if that is the case, my question is, do you think you accurately represented them and also did the best you can for them while you were working with the Trump administration?
Okay, thank you for the question. Let me unpack it. I've already run for office. I ran for school board. Have you ever had to deal with parents and their children? Oh my goodness. I ran for school board in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is the second largest school board in the nation. This election cost millions and millions of dollars. There were 16 candidates. And there I was. I decided to run to fight for the children. When you ask if I represented all black people, it's impossible to represent everyone. Again, I was not focused on approval, people liking me. I was focused on those children and providing quality education for them. In Los Angeles, children walk down the street in gang-infested neighborhoods. They go into schools that are falling down. I remember when I was subbing, I did some sub-teaching. I talk about it in the book after my fiance died. And there were ants crawling all over my syllabus. And so the fight was about the children. You'll never, Derek, find me worrying about what people think or trying to get their approval, because it's a colossal waste of time. The focus has to be on what is the agenda. And in that case, the agenda was children. Now, the second question is, would I run again? Absolutely. Absolutely, because what happens in politics, and you see it, some really weird people run for office, right? It's like these weird people who have never, they don't have a perspective of global. A lot of them aren't, I don't want to sound elitist, but they're not the most educated people or well-rounded people. They just run, and we all sit back and laugh. And we need people who are armed and equipped with knowledge and experience and come from different backgrounds, who are bold enough to go into the public arena and make a difference. The problem is we get discouraged because you watch this craziness and say, I don't want any part of it. But we need you. We need people who have the courage to get in there and be the change. So thank you for the question, Derek. Next question.
Thank you, Derek. Yes, Vincent here, just at the front.
Hi, Vincent. So one of my questions is that you kind of alluded to Trump being a kind of threat to democracy in some ways. And after the midterms, there was talk of, with a Democrat House, would there be a possibility of impeachment or things like that? Do you think that that is in itself also a threat to democracy, and which is the greater threat, I guess?
Thank you so much for that question. After the midterms, he gave this press conference where he talked and rambled for an hour and a half. Did anybody see it? Instead of thinking about impeachment, I started thinking about the 25th Amendment, where the president could be deemed unfit. Watching it was difficult. If he has committed a crime, he needs to be impeached. That's the simple fact. Whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans doing it, if he has committed a crime, high crimes and misdemeanors leads to impeachment. That needs to happen. The greatest threat is for people to sit aside and do nothing, to watch it happen and think that it's amusing as opposed to speaking up and standing against it. I believe that that's the greatest threat. Thank you for your question.
Thanks, Vincent. Yes, just over here.
Hi, I'm Jonathan.
Hi, Jonathan.
Thank you for being here. What I was wondering is, a lot of the narrative that you've been telling us about is that, when Trump started to do a lot of these things in office, you realized how appalling it was and tried to get out. What I'm wondering is, a lot of the things that he's done were things he said from the very first day he was going to do. Like that first speech he gave when he announced his presidency was pretty appalling and laid out very clearly what he was going to do. Mm-hmm. I was wondering, how did you kind of see him in that before stage? And I'm just trying to square how the story laid out.
Important question, Jonathan. Yeah. Thank you so much. Donald Trump, as I said at that point, was my friend of 13 years. And certainly you recognize that Donald Trump marched to his own drum. And his announcement was probably one of the most unorthodox announcements I ever heard in presidential history. But you have to remember that I came out of politics, and I've been in politics for a very long time. And politicians saying bizarre things and doing crazy things were not unusual to me. I mentioned that I was in the Clinton White House. Bill Clinton had a relationship with an intern and did things, in the Oval and that sort of thing. Not to say that I was desensitized, but I've seen a tremendous amount of crazy things in my 20 years of politics. That doesn't excuse Donald Trump's craziness. It just kind of is mixed in with all of that. And so at some point, you think that the presidency itself, that once you get in office, we thought that he would rise to the occasion. I know it sounds stupid now. Don't judge me, Jonathan. But somehow we thought, and I know some of you all may have been optimistic, that he would in some way rise to the occasion and allow the advisors to guide him. But instead, he, went, 140 character crazy on us. So I guess to answer that question more directly, you don't know. When a candidate starts out and they're saying they're going to do this, they're going to do that. I liked Hillary, but she had a past too. She had things that I agreed with and I disagreed with. And ultimately, in life you get duped. And I believed and I put my trust in somebody who turned out to not be who they said they were going to be. And I may be the only one in the room to discover that a person that you believed in or you trusted did something differently than what they said. But I had a very public experience with that in my engagement with Donald Trump. Thank you for your question, Jonathan.
Thank you for your question, Jonathan. Over there, right at the back.
Hi, my name is Luca. So I have
Say your name again?
Luca.
Luca, thank you.
Yeah. I have a question. So you mentioned that you had a professional relationship with him prior to him assuming office, which lasted for more than a decade. And we've heard numerous accusations of him using misogynist and racist and other words and slander and so on. Had he not shown that type of behavior during your professional relationship between the time you met him and him taking the office? Not once? I mean, before you agreed to help him run for the office? Since
Not trying to plug my book, but I go extensively into every single time I saw him behave badly, every single disgusting thing that he said to women or misogynistic thing. I talk about how hindsight is 20/20 and how there were red flags that I missed. But let me be very clear. His behavior is unacceptable. The way he's treated women and as you mentioned, the story about how he tried to buy off these women and how that's all coming to light. Everything that he's done in dark will come to light and will ultimately end his presidency. And so yes, I'm not making a plug for you to read the book, but I go into it in maybe 3 or 4 chapters, yes.
Thank you for that, Luca. Oh, wow. Just over here, Alicia.
Hello, I'm Alicia.
Hi, Alicia. How are you?
I'm okay. Thank you very
Good.
much. How are you?
Good, thank.
I'm just curious, because with Donald Trump, he says some pretty outrageous things that everyone likes to make fun of, especially online. You see it all over Twitter and Facebook, and people will quote his tweet, and start sort of a big trail of jokes and laughter.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's in any way harmful for not his authenticity, but for just, do you think it's any way harmful in the sense that you also talk about him being quite full of revenge and hatred? Do you think that impacts on him in any way, or?
Is it harmful that
Yeah.
he is the biggest cyber bully in the world?
Yeah.
Yes. Next question.
Sorry.
Just there at the back.
And what's ironic is his wife's campaign is about cyberbullying. You can't make this stuff up.
Hiya, I'm Poppy.
Hi, Poppy. How are you?
No, I'm really well.
Good.
So, in Fire and Fury, Trump is depicted as quite senile. He's forgetful. He finds it hard to focus in meetings and conferences. Were these things that you saw throughout your years working with him, and then again when he was in the White House?
Thank you for that question, Poppy. When I first met him, you all met him too. I was in the boardroom with him, and he was sharp, and he was entertaining, and 30 million people tuned in to see what he would do, and he was able to go through each of our tasks and decipher who was at fault, and it was entertaining. But in the last decade, I have watched a deterioration, but I also keep in mind what I know about his family. I knew that his mother had dementia. I knew that his father had Alzheimer's. And I knew that as he got closer to his late 60s and 70, that some of the things that I witnessed were manifestations of those neurological issues. Did I put him out there at the time and say, I think my boss is, losing it? No. But those are things that I observed, the forgetfulness, the repetition. It was so bizarre, Poppy. He would call you into his office and tell you a story about the election as if I wasn't there. He would go state by state election night. Then he would pull these maps out and he would go through the whole thing. And that would be around 10 in the morning. By 5, they'd be like, the president would like to see you in the Oval. I'm like, why? Because I knew it was one of those days that he was in that repeat mode. And sure enough, I would go over and he'd be like, hey, I got some new graphs. I want to show you this. First, Florida went, and then Ohio, and it would start over and over again. And I'm not a doctor, but I knew something was wrong. And, I talk about sharing with Ivanka and calling Don Jr. and calling Eric and sharing, my concerns. But yes, I witnessed it, I saw it, and I think that it is impairing his ability to fulfill his responsibilities as president.
Thank you for that question, Poppy. Just over here.
Hi, my name is Tabitha.
Hi, Tabitha. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I just had 2 quick questions. So the first one is, what do you think would eventually be Trump's demise? Because it seems like every scandal, we just kind of move past it and it becomes like old news. So many things have happened and they're very horrible and horrible things that he said. It just seems like we just move past it and next week it's something even worse. And then my second question is, as being the only black person in the room, how do you handle that? So that's more of a personal question. Yeah.
Thank you. Tabitha, as I stated, I believe that it'll be a culmination of things. I believe that he did utilize help and assistance from Russia. I do believe that he broke campaign finance laws by paying off porn stars and Playboy playmates. I believe that he is utilizing the office of the presidency to benefit personally. All of these things are illegal. I do believe that he obstructed justice by firing Comey to end the investigation. All of those things, any one of those things would shut down a traditional presidency. But in Trump's case, I believe it'll be a culmination. Your second question about how do you deal with it, you're going to find, and this is just me talking to you, you're going to find quite often that God will elevate you to positions that require you to be in a position that sometimes is lonely as a black woman. You're going to look around and not see anybody that looks like you. But you'll have to draw from your own personal faith and strength and know that God will not put you in a situation that you are not equipped for. He will not give you so much that you can't handle. So I believe that you are equipped, and I believe that you will be able to handle it, but you have to do the work. That self-reflection, that evaluation, to stand on your own principles. And Tabitha, when the time comes and you look around a room, because it happened to me for 20 years, you will know what to do and what to say and how to represent your family and yourself very proudly and boldly. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for that question, Tabitha. Just over here. Yes.
Hi, Omarosa. Thank you so much.
Hi, what's your name?
Johanna.
Hi, Johanna.
I have 2 questions. The first one, I saw you on the Daily Show with Trevor Noah, and you said the only thing...
Isn't Trevor Noah funny?
I love him.
I wasn't prepared for how much I laughed through the whole interview. I was kind of ready for the political type stuff, but I was not prepared to be cracking up through half the interview.
He's a very good late night host show. You said the only thing we can do against Donald Trump is to starve him of the oxygen, to deprive him of the attention. And I was wondering, how can we do that and still not close our eyes to the world? And one more question, because you said it's our sort of moral duty to try to impeach Trump, what do we do then if we have...
moral duty?
Well, you said it's if someone committed a crime, he should be impeached.
Yeah,
and I agree
you
with
do
that.
the crime, you should do the time.
I agree with that, but what do you think President Pence would be like?
This was fun until that question. No, I'm kidding. First of all, I stand by that, that we have to starve him. He loves that you constantly stay in a state of outrage. Have you seen what he did today? Did you see what he called the black reporter today? Did you see what he tweeted? Can you believe this? We are in this constant stage of outrage. We go from one crisis to the next to the next. The only way, and it's happening slowly, the first indication is that the networks aren't carrying his rallies, wall-to-wall coverage of his rallies. That was the first sign for me that he is slowly losing his grip on our consciousness. And you know what he did as a result, because I know him so well? He says, they won't cover my rallies. I'll turn up the heat. I'll do stuff so outrageous that every newspaper in the world will have it as the headline the next day. I'll do something so crazy that you can't help but talk about me. And so he's turned up the rhetoric and the divisiveness and the hatred. But we have to turn down the outrage. I'm not saying that to push back, but not to allow him to consume so much space in our head and so much of our conversation, because that is what he wants. I just saw that he insulted Michelle Obama. Not only is she a friend, a first lady, an accomplished woman, but there was these basic courtesies that you extended to the past president and his wife. She was right. He did put her family in harm's way. And what does she do? He turns around and he attacks her and he makes a story about her. I was so tempted to say something and to tweet something, but I recognize that everything I say and tweet becomes a headline, and I didn't want to give him that. And so instead, a group of prominent African American women, we have come up with a strategy to help young women in schools, in elementary schools, to deal and cope, as opposed to feeding him headline after headline, tweet after tweet. And that's important. I believe that that's important. I can't remember your second question, girl. Was there a second one? Oh, Pence. I was trying to forget it. I got into a bit of trouble on a show called Big Brother. Y'all know Big Brother? Oh, God, I had so much fun on Big Brother. Because I criticized Pence. I think I was probably the first and only person to criticize Pence to come out of the Trump administration, because he is the golden boy. He says the right thing. He does the right thing. He agrees with everything Trump says. And you know what? He's biding his time. He is so diabolical. I don't even have enough time to tell you how terrifying he is, because Trump just kind of fumbles from one thing to the next, not really comprehending what he's doing. Pence, on the other hand, is dangerous because he knows exactly what his agenda is. And he tries to use and exploit faith to manipulate the American people. I'm going to stop there because I don't want to make a headline. But I'm just telling you that he is much more dangerous. I'm hoping, well, I'll just stop there.
Thank you very much for that.
I had a goal tonight. Don't make headlines.
I think we've only got time for one more
so.
question. So
one more. Let's take a couple more.
A couple more. Oh, that's fine. Okay. Just at the back.
Having so much fun.
Hello. My name's Jemima. Thank you for coming.
Say your name again.
Jemima.
Jemima? Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful.
So my question is that one way or another, Trump will one day be gone. And so based on your experience, your long experience in politics, what do you think is on the horizon? Because to me it seems that the American people are very, very polarized. And importantly also, the people that Trump his core supporters who he said he would help will probably not be helped. And so my question is, do you think that there will be, what will their reaction be? Will they will a more extreme candidate come along? Or will there be someone who will be able to bring the American people back together, which I think seems so important?
Thank you so much. Such a good question. I have hope, just based on history, that our country is resilient, that we'll be able to survive this nightmare, and that we'll come out on the other side stronger, that we'll learn from our mistakes. I certainly know that I have. And I believe that people are starting to see the light. I'm from Ohio. Darian's from Ohio. I don't know where he went. Hi, wave Darian. It's my cousin. He made a lot of promises to Ohio, for instance, that he was going to improve jobs and housing and education and bring the factories back and coal and manufacturing. All of it was a lie. And when people struggle to fill prescriptions or to fill their gas tank or their health care is being taken away, they're not going to continue to vote against their interests. At some point, you wake up and you realize, like me, you've been duped or lied to, and you want a new start and you want to go a new direction. And I believe that we started to see that in the midterms, and I pray, Jemima, that we'll see going forward that the country will not only survive but thrive after Trump. Thank you. A couple more.
Thank you very much for that question, Jemima. Just over here, it went up very quickly.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, if it's okay, I wouldn't like to say my name.
You don't want to say your name?
Sorry?
Did you say you want to say your name?
If it's okay, I don't want to say my name, but I've got...
Sure, but just make sure you ask your question quietly, because they're recording you.
No, it's just because I'm shy, don't worry. So I'm going to ask about like different racial groups in America. You obviously established like that you're really close to sort of the African American community, especially amongst women and everything. And I want to ask about the particular problems that the like African Americans and like even Latinos, who tend to be the kind of lowest performing economic group in America with the most sort of socio-political problems. Obviously not entirely, like not their fault at all. It's just like a culmination of different historical problems and everything. But if you look at other racial groups in America, for example, Chinese, especially East Asian, and Southeast Asian, especially from India as well, they're performing really well economically. A lot of them go to university and get really good degrees, get really good jobs, and make a lot of money and kind of break into that middle class. And America's always been seen as that country which is, I guess, provides that American dream for immigrants who come and who've built the country over time. But do you think this has really happened for African American people? And if not, like, what are the problems in that community? And how can the people in them help to solve them? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very careful to not, again, group all African Americans into one group, because I think that that's more damaging than taking a real look at African Americans and different social economic dynamics, different parts of the country, whether they're rural or in the inner cities, whether they're educated or uneducated. One of the things that I'm encouraged by is how many African American women were elected on Tuesday, how many African American women have decided, and men, to step up and to take control of their local communities, to step up and run for Congress, or to run for, in our case, tax collector in Jacksonville with Mia Jones, or Stacey Abrams in Georgia. African Americans have to become so much more self-reliant and not look to the government at all, because what I witnessed during my time is that the Republicans particularly have no interest in diversity or improving the lives of the people that they say they want to improve. And as we know, Republicans want to make a smaller government and reduce programs. And so I always encourage entrepreneurship, of having your own and standing on your own. There was a time in the African American community where we had our own banks and we had our own schools, and we had, not that I'm celebrating segregation, but there was an economic essence to the community that made them independent. And so a lot of that is necessary. But the one thing that I'm encouraged by is knowing that 98% of African American women did not vote for Trump. So African American women were trying to save us from Trump. but also knowing that that trend will continue. And so as a voting bloc, if I was to just put them in a group, that group will continue to go against Trump's policies, which will essentially, hopefully, bring his administration to a very rapid end.
Thank you very much for that question.
Last one?
Yeah, last one then. Just here.
Mohammed's giving me that look. I'm messing up his time frame.
Hey, Omarosa. I'm Ariman.
Say it again.
Ariman.
Ariman?
Aryaman.
Oh, okay. With a name like Omarosa, I try to get names right.
Thank you so much for coming. So my question is, in the last 2 years, in the last couple of years really, we've seen an increase in overt public displays of racism and anti-Semitism in America. And what I want to know is, do you think that these are people that perhaps already had a little bit of bias but were turned by the president's rhetoric? Or do you think that they were always racist and anti-Semitic and we're just now seeing them because they feel like they're being backed up by the president?
Such a great question. Racism didn't start with Trump, but it certainly has been emboldened by Trump. I think it was Gillum that said, I'm not calling you a racist, the racists call you racist. And I believe that that's true. They have found their leader. They found they found a person who allowed them to be emboldened and not afraid to attack people who are different from them, to do these senseless acts against people who have different color of them. And it is, it's unfortunate that this force that was traditionally in the underbellies of America have now just ripped off their sheets and they're out in the daylight. And they don't care. They want to spread hate. But I know that positivity and love can counter hate. And so I'm going to stand on the side of love. Thank you so much for the question. Thank you all. Such good questions.
Thank you very much for your time, Omarosa. If you could all join me in giving her a very warm round of applause. So there will be a book signing in the dining room straight after this, but if I could ask you all to remain in your seats to wait for us to leave the chamber. Okay, have your cameras ready too as well. Marissa loves selfies. We've got a great week ahead for you. Tuesday we'll see the former president of Kosovo, followed by the most vocal critic of the Duterte government. Wednesday we'll see us welcome Lady Leisha, one of the new queens of British rap. To keep up to date with Union events, please like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to the Cambridge Union. Thank you very much and have a good weekend.